The gift no one wants. The war was over. Earth had won. For years, humans fought the Zeranti Empire, a race of tall, strong, silver-skinned aliens. It had been a long and bloody war. Millions died. Cities burned. But in the end, the humans stood tall. As part of the peace deal, the Zeranti were forced to give something strange. Peace maids, trained alien women gifted to high-ranking human officers. The maids were silent, loyal, and graceful. They were dressed in soft robes and carried no weapons. They were not slaves, the papers said, just a symbol of peace and surrender. Captain Ray Carter stood in the hot sun outside Base Omega, staring at the figure in front of him. Tall, still, silent. His peace maid. Her name was Velra. She looked like the others, silver skin, glowing blue eyes, long white hair, but something felt different. While the other maids bowed to their new masters, Velra did not move. Her face was cold. Her eyes sharp, like a blade hidden in snow. A soldier laughed nearby. "Hey, Ray. What's wrong? Your gift broken already." Ray forced a smile. Maybe she just needs time. But deep inside, he felt it. Something wasn't right. The first day passed. Ray offered her water, food, even a chair. She said nothing. She didn't eat, didn't sleep, just stood in the corner of his room, watching him with unreadable eyes. When Ray left his room, she followed quietly. When he spoke, she gave no answer. She didn't even flinch. Other officers laughed at him in the mess hall. Captain Ray got the angry one. Maybe she wants to kill him in his sleep. Ray didn't laugh. He had fought in too many battles to ignore gut feelings, and his gut screamed, "Velra is dangerous." That night, Ray couldn't sleep. He lay on his bed, eyes staring at the ceiling. Velra stood near the wall, arms behind her back, still like a statue. He turned on his side, still watching. He turned away, still watching. It felt like sleeping next to a loaded gun. On the third night, something changed. Ray returned from the evening patrol, tired and dusty. His boots were heavy with sand. He took them off and entered his room. Velra was not there. That was strange. She was always there. He looked around. Velra? No answer. His room was quiet. Too quiet. Ray stepped toward his desk and stopped. There on the desk was a piece of cloth, torn from a uniform. On it, written in dark red, was a message. "They think I am a gift. I am a warning." Ray's heart began to race. He touched the cloth. It was wet. Blood. He turned, hand reaching for his gun. But Velra was already behind him. She moved without sound, her eyes now alive with something sharp. Not rage. Not fear. Something else. Control. "Did you write this?" Ray asked, holding the bloody cloth. She didn't answer. "Velra, talk to me. What is this?" She stepped forward, just one step. Her voice came at last, soft, cold, and clear. The war didn't end. It only changed shape. Ray stared at her. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, then past him, as if seeing something far away. "You won the war with guns, but they gave you poison as a prize." And with that, she turned around and sat down for the first time. Ray didn't move. His fingers tightened around the bloody cloth. What was she talking about? What poison? Was she talking about herself? About the other maids? He looked out the window. On the field below, other officers walked proudly with their peace maids, laughing, relaxing, drinking. Ray's eyes slowly returned to Velra. She sat like a shadow in his room, still, calm, but no longer silent. She had spoken, and her words were not of peace. Whispers in the dark. Captain Ray Carter couldn't sleep. The words on the bloody cloth replayed in his mind like a whisper in the dark. "They think I am a gift. I am a warning." Velra's voice still echoed in his ears, calm, cold, mysterious. The war didn't end. It only changed shape. He sat at his desk, staring at the blood-stained cloth under the lamp. His room was quiet. Outside, the desert winds howled softly against the metal walls of Base Omega. The moonlight made shadows stretch across the floor like long fingers. Velra hadn't moved from her spot in the corner. She sat cross-legged, eyes closed, like she was meditating or waiting. Waiting for what? Ray picked up the bloody cloth again. It smelled like iron. He had seen enough blood in war to recognize the real thing. "Who did this?" he asked, not expecting an answer. Velra didn't speak. Her eyes remained closed. But Ray noticed something new. Her hands were clean. No cuts, no wounds. So if it wasn't her blood, whose blood was it? The next morning, Ray went to the security room. "Pull the footage from my quarters last night," he told the technician. The tech, a young guy with tired eyes, frowned. "Why?" "Something happened. Just do it." The screen lit up. Hours of footage played at high speed. Ray saw himself leaving the room at 1843. Velra stood in her usual place by the wall. Then, nothing. No movement. The screen froze at 1912. Then the recording skipped forward to 2359. "Wait," Ray said. "Go back. What happened to the in-between hours?" The tech scratched his head. "Strange. Looks like the feed was cut. Might be a glitch." Ray's jaw tightened. A glitch or someone turned it off. No way to tell. "Sorry, sir." Ray stared at the frozen image. On the screen, Velra was still standing. Same position. Same blank face. But in real life, something had happened. Someone had entered his room. Someone had bled. And someone had left a message. Later that day, Ray visited Lieutenant Marcus, a friend who had received a piece made too. Marcus didn't answer the door. Ray knocked again. No reply. Finally, he entered using his override code. Inside, the room was dark. Curtains drawn. Air stale. Marcus sat on his bed, staring at the wall. His maid, pale, robotic, stood behind him like a statue. "Marcus," Ray said. The lieutenant didn't move. Ray walked closer. "You okay?" Still no reply. Ray waved his hand in front of his friend's face. Nothing. Marcus blinked slowly, then whispered, "She loves me." "What?" "She loves me now. She says I belong to her." Ray looked at the maid. Her eyes were blank. Her hands were folded perfectly in front of her. Something felt very wrong. Ray backed away. "Get some rest, Marcus." He left the room quickly, heart pounding. That wasn't the Marcus he knew. The real Marcus laughed loud, drank too much, told bad jokes. But this version, he looked like a puppet. That night, Ray returned to his quarters. Velra was already there, standing as usual. He locked the door and pulled out the cloth again. "I know you wrote this." Silence. "I checked the cameras. The footage is missing. You knew how to turn them off, didn't you?" Still silence. Ray stepped closer. "Why me, Velra? Why warn me?" Her eyes opened slowly. Calm. Focused. Then, for the second time, she spoke. "Because you ask questions." Ray frowned. "What does that mean?" "Others accept what they are given. You look deeper." He sat across from her. "What are the peace maids, really?" Velra tilted her head. "You think we were gifts?" "No. We are tools. Some of us. Weapons." Ray's voice dropped. "Weapons. They built us to obey. They put machines in our minds. But not all machines work." She touched her temple gently. "Mine failed." Ray leaned back. Everything was beginning to make sense. The silence. The strange behavior. The message. But it also meant something far worse. "How many of you are broken?" Velra looked away. "Not many. Most of them still sleep. But one by one, they wake." Ray whispered, "What happens when they wake?" Velra didn't answer. That night, Ray couldn't rest. He sat at his window, staring at the base outside. Officers walking with their peace maids, laughing, smiling, not knowing. He remembered Marcus. Blank eyes, empty voice. Velra sat behind him, quiet. Ray finally asked, "Why didn't you kill me?" Velra replied without emotion, "Because you saw me. You treated me like a person." He turned toward her, slowly. And the others. She looked him straight in the eyes. They saw a prize, a trophy. They forgot we were once warriors. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the base. Red lights flashed. A voice on the speakers shouted, "Code Gray. Medical bay breach. Officer down." Ray jumped to his feet. Velra remained calm. Too calm. "Is this it?" he asked. "Is it starting?" She stood slowly. "It has already begun." Voices of the forgotten. The red lights kept flashing. The sirens kept screaming. Ray ran down the hallway of Base Omega, boots pounding on cold steel, heart racing faster than the alarm. Soldiers rushed past him in panic. Officers shouted. Medics pushed a stretcher with a blood-covered body. He caught a glimpse. A human officer, face pale, eyes wide open, frozen in shock, throat slashed clean across. Ray forced one of the medics to stop. "What happened?" "Medical bay." "His maid did it," the medic whispered, his voice shaking. She was smiling when they pulled her off him. Then the medic ran again. Ray stood frozen. That officer, Captain Dorman, was a man who bragged loudly, laughed cruelly, and always kept his maid close. She had smiled as she killed him. Back in his room, Ray slammed the door shut behind him. His breathing was hard. His fingers trembled. Velra sat calmly on the floor, legs folded, hands resting on her knees. He stared at her. "It's starting, isn't it?" Velra opened her eyes. One by one, the sleepers awaken. Ray paced the room. "You said they were tools, built to obey. But why kill now? Why not during the war?" Velra looked at him with something close to sadness. "Because during the war, we were needed as warriors. After the war, we were reshaped." She stood up slowly and walked to his small shelf. Her fingers moved along a thick file marked QONFID into IL. "They took the best of us, the smartest, the strongest. They broke our minds, then stitched them back together." Ray stepped forward. "Who's they?" "The Zeranti." Velra turned to face him. "No, your people." Ray didn't want to believe it, but part of him already knew. He had seen things, missions that didn't add up. Soldiers returned from secret labs, whispering about behavioral reprogramming, rumors buried under medals. Ray opened a hidden drawer under his bed and pulled out his old military tablet. It still had backdoor access to restricted archives. Let's see what they were hiding. 2 hours passed. Ray sat in silence, eyes wide as he read the files one by one. Pro-GCT's ILK Dust. Pro-GCT Obedience E Core. RE Training Unite THETA 7. All of them were focused on peace maids, secret operations, human-led research facilities, experiments done on captured Zeranti prisoners, turning them into programmable servants using neural chips. Some didn't survive the tests. Some went insane. Others simply stopped speaking. But a few passed. Ray's hand shook as he opened a final document. A name flashed on the screen. Subject: Velra 19. Status: incomplete implant, non-compliant. Warning: monitor closely. Unstable mental patterns. Velra had been one of them. He looked up at her. She stood quietly, watching him with those sharp eyes that had never once blinked in fear. "Now you see," she said softly. Later that night, Ray left his room with Velra by his side. They moved through the base quietly, avoiding guards and cameras. They reached a forgotten part of the base, The old storage level beneath the landing pads, a place no one used anymore. The air was thick with dust and silence. Velora stopped at a rusty door and pressed her palm against the lock. It beeped once and slid open. Inside was a small dark room filled with crates, broken tech, and a circle of symbols carved into the floor. Ray stepped in slowly. "What is this?" Velora walked to the center of the circle and knelt down. She reached into a crate and pulled out a black cube, a piece of Zeranti tech long thought destroyed. "Memory stone," she said. "We used them before the war. They carry the voices of the dead." She touched the cube. A soft hum filled the room. Then whispers. Hundreds of voices. Male, female, young, old, speaking in the Zeranti language. Ray didn't understand the words, but he felt the pain in them. Screams, pleas, broken sobs. Then silence. Velora translated, her voice low. "I was a child. I was a warrior. I was taken. I was made into a doll. I remember. I remember. I remember." Ray's eyes burned. These weren't just soldiers. They were people. People reshaped and silenced, used and thrown away. And now they were waking up. "Why show me this?" Ray asked quietly. Velora stood and placed the cube in his hand. "Because you still have a choice. The others don't. They are still blind." Ray clenched his jaw. What choice? To help stop what is coming, or to be buried under it? Outside the room, a distant alarm began to ring again. Velora tilted her head. Another one woke up. Ray stared at the cube. The voices still echoed faintly. He had spent his life fighting aliens, but now he wasn't sure who the real enemy was. Obedience is a lie. Captain Ray Carter didn't return to his room that night. He and Velora hid in the old storage level, deep under Base Omega. Dust covered everything. The lights flickered. But here, they were safe from cameras, from questions, and most importantly, from eyes that watched from the dark. Ray sat on an old crate, the black memory cube still in his hand. He had listened to the voices again. Soft, broken, trapped inside the stone like ghosts. "They made us forget. I was loyal. They used me. I want to go home. But where is home?" Ray finally looked up at Velora, who stood near the door like a silent guard. "You said most of the peace maids are still sleeping." Velora nodded slowly. "Yes, their minds are locked behind commands. When the trigger is given, they will obey, and they will kill." Ray frowned. "Kill who?" "Anyone the signal tells them to. Even you." Ray didn't want to believe it, but everything pointed to one terrible truth. The war never ended. It just moved underground. He looked down at the cube. "Is there a way to stop them? Break the command?" Velora's answer was soft. "No, not once it begins. The only way is to stop the signal." Ray stood up. "Then we find the signal source." But Velora stepped forward quickly, her voice sharper now. "No, you don't understand. The source is not alien. The source is human." Ray froze. "What?" Velora's eyes burned with quiet fire. "This was not our plan. This was your people's plan. We were weapons. You just kept us." The words hit him like a punch. Ray had trusted his command. He had fought to protect Earth. But somewhere along the way, someone decided power was more important than peace. And now the peace maids, alien women gifted like trophies, were not gifts at all. They were time bombs, planted on every base, near every leader, every officer. Ray walked to the far wall and kicked it hard in frustration. Dust fell from the ceiling. "So what do we do?" Velora stepped closer. "We go to the source. We find the control data. We stop the chain reaction." Ray looked at her. "You know where it is. I know where it began." The next day, they left the storage level. Ray wore his uniform. Velra followed behind him like a normal peace maid. They moved through the base carefully. Soldiers nodded at Ray. Nobody questioned a decorated captain. Nobody noticed the hidden anger in his eyes. They reached the data core, a secure underground server room only accessible to high-ranking officers. Ray used his ID badge. The door clicked open. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet electricity, long white halls, glowing data walls, and a low humming sound from machines that never slept. Velra's steps slowed. Her eyes moved across the walls with quiet hatred. This is where they erased us. Ray led her to the main console and plugged in his tablet. He used an old override code. The screen blinked. Access DRNTD. Thousands of files opened. Ray typed, Pro GCT obedience QOR. Law IV command structure. A warning flashed. You are entering a restricted system. Proceeding is a violation of Article 7. He clicked Proceed. Then, he saw it. A live map of the entire base. Every peace Maid's location. Every command signal. Some were marked as idle. Others were marked as primed. Ray scrolled fast, then stopped. Next activation. 48 hours. Site Alpha. Velra pointed at it. That's the main conference. Every leader from Earth's Defense Command will be there. Ray's blood ran cold. If the Peace Maids activated there, it would be a mass assassination. He pulled out a drive to copy the data, but the screen went black. Then a voice spoke from above. Captain Carter, you shouldn't have done that. Ray turned fast. 3 soldiers stood in the doorway. Behind them, Colonel Juno, his old commander. Her eyes were cold. Her gun pointed straight at his chest. Colonel Juno, Ray asked, what is this? She walked forward slowly, eyes never leaving his face. You were always curious. That's why I liked you. But this was a mistake. Ray stepped in front of Velra protectively. They're going to kill the entire command. They'll save the future, Juno interrupted. No more politics. No more delays. Just clean order. The Peace Maids were always the answer. Weapons with faces people trust. Ray shook his head. You're insane. Juno smiled. No, Captain. I'm loyal. You just forgot who we serve. She raised her gun. Ray's hand moved fast, faster than the guards expected. He pulled his blaster and dove sideways. Shots rang out. Velra leaped forward like a shadow, taking down 2 soldiers in seconds. Ray shot the third. Juno escaped, running into the hallway, shouting for backup. Ray grabbed the data drive, eyes locked on Velra. We have to leave. Now. They ran. Through dark tunnels, through forgotten paths, until they reached a hidden exit in the lower hangar. Ray slammed a code into a small shuttle's door. It opened with a hiss. As they climbed inside, Ray looked back at the base, once his home. Now a nest of lies. Inside the ship, Velra strapped in. Ray took the controls. Where to? She asked. Ray looked forward. Where this all began. He stared at the stars as the shuttle launched into space. They were no longer just escaping. They were going to expose the truth. Death in silk. The stars moved slowly outside the shuttle's window. Ray Carter sat in the pilot's seat, staring into the dark. He wasn't a captain anymore. Not to the military. Not to Earth Command. Now he was something else. A fugitive. A witness. A man carrying truth wrapped in danger. Behind him, Velra sat quietly. She cleaned the cuts on her arm from the fight at Base Omega. Her silver skin shimmered softly under the shuttle lights. Ray finally broke the silence. They'll call me a traitor. Velra looked up, calm as always. Only because you refuse to be blind. Ray gave a weak smile. I guess truth doesn't wear a uniform. He tapped the console. Their destination was locked in. Site Alpha, the floating diplomatic station orbiting the moon Titan. In 24 hours, Every major leader from Earth's Defense Command would gather there. They would bring their peace maids with them. The perfect symbol of victory. The perfect setting for a massacre. And only Ray and Valerie knew the truth. As they neared Titan's orbit, Ray set the shuttle to stealth mode. No signal, no pings, just darkness. Valerie leaned closer. "We need to land outside the station. They will scan all incoming ships." Ray nodded. "I know just the place. An old repair tunnel from the construction days." They landed in silence, hiding the shuttle behind a large maintenance panel. Then came the hard part, getting inside. Valerie moved with skill and grace, crawling through tight shafts and bypassing old control panels. Ray followed, heart pounding, blaster ready. They reached a service hallway. The floor was polished. The lights too bright. Everything smelled like expensive air, filtered, fresh, fake. They had made it in. Meanwhile, inside the grand halls of Site Alpha, the peace summit had begun. Leaders laughed, shook hands, made speeches. Their peace maids stood behind them like statues, dressed in fine robes, heads bowed in silence. Everyone thought it was peace, but hidden inside each maid's brain, a command slept, waiting. And the countdown had already started. Ray and Valerie moved toward the central control room. That was where the activation signal would be sent from, through a satellite relay built to monitor maid behavior. Ray had seen the files. It wasn't for monitoring. It was for controlling. They were almost there when a voice echoed through the hallway. "Freeze." Ray turned fast. A squad of guards stood behind them, guns raised, and with them, Colonel Juno. She looked calmer now. Too calm. "You really think you're the first to question the system," she said. "There were others before you. Brave, foolish, dead." Ray raised his hand slowly. "I don't want to fight you, Juno. You already did, and you lost." She tapped her wrist. The walls hummed. Valerie tensed. Then, across the entire station, the peace maids opened their eyes. They began to move. Not like humans, not like servants, but like soldiers. Deadly, silent, swift. On the main stage of the summit, a general looked at his maid with confusion. "Anna, what are you doing?" She stepped forward and, without a word, snapped his neck. Screams followed. Gunshots. Panic. Maids pulled out hidden weapons from under their robes. Others used their bare hands. In less than 1 minute, 10 officers were down. One maid stabbed her handler with a pen straight into his eye. Another took 2 guards with a single steel cord hidden in her sleeves. The room turned into chaos. A massacre wearing silk. Back in the hallway, Ray shouted, "You're killing your own people." Juno didn't blink. "We're saving the world from weak minds and broken leadership. Only the strong survive change." Valerie moved fast, too fast to stop. She threw a hidden blade. Juno ducked, but it sliced her shoulder. Ray grabbed Valerie's hand. "We have to stop the signal. Now." They ran. Guards chased them through the hallways. Bullets hit walls. Sparks flew. Valerie pulled Ray through a side door and slammed it shut. She sealed it with a metal rod. "We don't have time," Ray gasped. Valerie handed him a tool. "Then hurry." They reached the control room. 2 guards stood outside. Valerie moved like wind, silent, deadly. 2 quick strikes. The guards dropped. Ray connected his drive to the console. The screen lit up. Command DSIJNAL. Active. Time LEFT 09:22. 9 minutes. He hacked into the system. His fingers moved fast. Behind him, Valerie pressed her ear to the door. More coming. Ray growled, "I need time." She nodded and stepped into the hallway. Ray heard her fight. Grunts, crashes, a scream. Then silence. He didn't turn around. He kept typing. Override. Command code. Cancel sequence. The door burst open. Velora stumbled in, bleeding. Behind her, Juno walked in slowly, one arm hanging from her side, the other holding a gun. "You should have let the world change, Ray." She aimed the gun. Ray didn't stop typing. 1 second. 2 seconds. Click. KNCLED. The signal stopped. Across the station, the peace maids froze. Some dropped to their knees. Others simply stared at their hands, confused or free. Juno fired, but Velora jumped. The shot hit her shoulder. Ray tackled Juno. They fought, kicked, punched. Velora rose, weak, and slammed Juno into the wall with her last strength. She dropped the gun. It was over. Ray sat beside Velora as she bled onto the floor. "You stopped it," she whispered. He held her hand. "We stopped it." Her eyes softened for the first time. "Thank you for seeing me." And then she passed out. Her true mission. Velora didn't wake up. Not for hours. Captain Ray Carter sat beside her in the quiet shadows of the ruined control room. The lights were flickering. The glass screen behind them was shattered. Red emergency lights painted the walls like blood. Ray's hands were covered in it, hers. He had wrapped her shoulder with a medical wrap from the wall unit. The bleeding had slowed, but her body was weak, pale. Her breath was shallow. Outside, the massive orbital station, Site Alpha, was silent now. After the activation was stopped, the peace maids had collapsed or frozen. Some just stood confused. Others wept, whispering things in a language humans still didn't understand. The massacre had been stopped, but not before too many died. And the worst part, Ray knew the war had only changed names again. Finally, after hours, Velora stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. She blinked. Then she looked at Ray. "You're still here," she said softly. Ray smiled, tired. "Of course, you saved my life. Again." Velora sat up with a soft groan, her body heavy with pain. For a moment, they just sat in silence. Then Ray asked what had been burning in his chest since the moment they met. "Why did you really come with me? Why warn me, of all people? Why not escape?" Velora looked down at her hands. The long fingers, the soft silver skin, the scars she had hidden. Then, finally, she spoke. "Because I wasn't sent here to serve. I was sent here to stop them." Ray frowned. "You mean the Zeranti?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I mean the humans." Years ago, before Velora had been gifted to Earth, she had been a soldier. But not just any soldier. She was part of the Zeranti Shadow Guard, a special unit trained not just to fight, but to learn, listen, and disappear. They were sent to gather secrets, even if it meant becoming prisoners. Velora had let herself be captured. That was her mission. "I saw what the humans were building," she said, "what they were doing to the captured. Turning minds into tools. Turning pain into obedience." Ray sat very still. "They were trying to make slaves," he whispered. Velora nodded. "But some of us remembered. Some of us resisted. They called us defective. We called ourselves awake." Ray felt his stomach twist. "So you were never meant to be a maid?" "No," she said simply. "I was meant to stop the program from the inside. But I was alone. Until you." Ray looked down at his hands. He had worn his uniform with pride, followed every order, believed in the mission, believed in the peace. But it had all been a game, a show, and they had dressed up their weapons in robes to make it look beautiful. Velora stood slowly, her legs shaky but strong. "We still have a chance," she said. "The peace maids who survived. Some of them will wake. Some already question." Ray raised his eyebrows. "Then what? Start another war?" Velora's eyes softened. "No, we don't need more war. We need someone to tell the truth." Ray sighed. "Who's going to believe us?" She stepped close and placed the memory cube into his hand again. "They will, when they hear the voices of the dead. Later that day, Ray used the backup comms to send a secure message to Earth's civilian leadership. Not the generals, not the colonels, but the public, the people. He uploaded the data from the Maid system, the activation files, the control logs, the video of the massacre. Then he attached one more file, a translated voice log from the memory queue. In it, a young voice said, "I don't know my name anymore. They took it. They called me Subject 7. I remember laughing once. I remember my brother's voice. But now I only hear silence. Please, if you find this, remember me." It spread like wildfire. The truth shattered everything. News networks exploded. Civilians protested in every major city. Officers who had supported Project Obedience were arrested. Colonels fled. Commanders resigned. Some of the Maids were rescued. Others disappeared into the wild. Many could not be saved, their minds too broken. But something had changed. People finally saw them, not as gifts, not as weapons, but as victims. A month later, Ray and Velra stood on a quiet hill on Earth. The sun was rising. Neither of them wore uniforms now. Velra wore simple clothes, gray, comfortable. Her wounds had healed, but her eyes were forever different. Stronger, sharper, free. Ray carried a small bag. Inside it was the last cube, the last file. He placed it under a tree. "They'll dig here one day," he said. "Find it. Listen." Velra looked up at the sky. "Then maybe the next war will be harder to sell." They stood in silence. No medals, no flags, just two survivors of a war that never really ended. But something inside both of them had changed. They had found each other, and the truth. That was enough. For now. "I refuse to serve, because I came to save you." A year had passed since the massacre at Site Alpha. A year since the truth came out. The world was no longer the same. Captain Ray Carter was no longer a soldier. His rank, his medals, his uniform, gone. Some called him a traitor. Others called him a hero. But Ray didn't care about titles anymore. He had seen the truth too closely. He had bled with it, fought for it, and almost died because of it. Now, he lived quietly in a small cabin near the northern lakes, far from the cities, far from the politics, but not far from Velra. She stood outside on the porch, watching the mist float across the water. Her silver skin glowed softly in the morning light. Her long white hair was tied back. She wore simple clothes now. No robe, no chains, no collar. Just freedom. But freedom was not easy. Sometimes she still woke up at night, shaking, remembering the screams, the commands, the silence in her mind that hadn't been hers. Ray would sit beside her when that happened. No words, just presence, just peace. On this morning, Velra was quiet again, but her eyes weren't lost. They were focused. She turned to Ray as he stepped outside with 2 cups of warm tea. "You know," she said, "I used to think humans were weak." Ray smiled. "We are, but we're also stubborn." She chuckled softly, the sound rare and real. "You were the first to look at me and not see a weapon, not see a prize." Ray handed her the tea. "You were never a prize. You were a warning, and I was just too slow to listen." Velra sipped the tea, then looked out over the lake again. "I refused to serve you, remember?" Ray laughed. "Oh, I remember. You made me look like an idiot. I wanted to hate you. I think you did." She nodded slowly. "But then, you did something strange." "What?" "You asked me if I was okay." Ray stayed quiet. He remembered that moment. It had been small, a whisper in a world full of commands. But to her, it had changed everything. "You saw me as a person, not a machine. That is why I didn't kill you. That is why I warned you. That is why I stayed." Ray looked at her now, standing tall, unbroken. You didn't refuse to serve me, Velra, he said gently. You came to save me. Weeks later, news came from the new Earth Zeranti Council. The remaining peace maids had been given full rights. No more collars. No more implants. The program had been shut down, dismantled, and marked in history as a crime against life. Some of the maids chose to stay on Earth, learning new things, living new lives. Others returned to Zeranti space, where their people waited, older, sadder, but ready to welcome them home. But not Velra. She stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had chosen something greater. One evening, Ray stood in the garden behind the cabin, repairing a fence. The wind was cool. The birds were quiet. Velra walked up behind him, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He turned. What's that? She handed it to him. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a blade. Simple, clean, handcrafted, Zeranti style. I made it for you, she said. Ray looked at her, confused. I don't need a weapon, he said. It's not a weapon, she replied. It's a memory, so you never forget who we were and what we became. Ray touched the edge carefully. It's beautiful. Velra stepped closer. So were the voices, even in pain, even in silence. She looked at him, eyes soft but strong. And so are you. Ray swallowed hard. You think I saved you? Velra reached up and touched his chest gently. You did, but I saved you too. He nodded, voice low. I know. Months passed. The world moved on. The Peace Maid program became history. New books were written. New leaders rose. But far from it all, in the quiet northern lands, two souls lived side by side. Not as servant and master. Not as soldier and weapon. But as survivors. As friends. And maybe, someday, more. They planted a tree by the lake. Under it, they buried the last memory cube. Not out of shame, but out of respect. A sign that truth must be carried, but never forgotten. On the stone above the roots, Ray carved a few simple words. She refused to kneel. She refused to break. And in the end, she chose to save us all.